either live by the gun or you die by the sword.
Welcome to the Good, the Bad, and the Weird podcast, where two podcasters enter a closet in search of cinematic truth. It will not leave until justice is served. I'm Nico.
And I'm Chris.
And if you haven't guessed it, we are doing my choice for the good from our bingo game of season 6. I decided to go with 12 Angry Men.
A perfect choice.
And I had a very hard time choosing what good movie I wanted for this slot, because there's a lot of movies that I absolutely love.
True.
And after thinking it for it a bit, I chose why not go with the movie that I think is near close to perfect in both entertainment level, technical level, and its message.
I agree. This movie is pretty damn good.
Oh yeah. And I even turned off the AC to experience the same tension.
That's great. I didn't.
Yeah.
I did watch this in a hard wooden chair because I hadn't quite put together my new office chair yet. I was using my old dining chair, so I got the vibe.
Yeah. Just not the New York heat.
No, thank God.
With no central AC either.
Oh, yeah, the 1950s looked miserable.
So, for those who are unfamiliar, 12 Angry Men is a court drama movie about 12 men who enter the jury chamber to discuss the potential life and death choice of a young man accused of killing his father.
Indeed. It is very suspenseful. It is delightful.
Written by Reginald Rose, directed by Sidney Lumet. It stars Henry Fonda, Lee J. Cobb, and Martin Balsam.
Oh, yes, it does.
Our sources for today's episode include Introduction to TV Version by the Curator of Media for New York City, Ron Simon. 12 Angry Men, From TV to Big Screen. Film scholar Vance Kepley looks at history. Interviews with director Sidney Lumet, as well as a short featurette on Reginald Rose.
And a very short legal interpretation from Legal Eagle on YouTube.
Nice. I did not listen to that one, so I'm
I
curious
wanted
what
to
you
know
think.
how realistic this all was, and so I went to a lawyer on YouTube who he was doing a whole bunch of them, so I'm taking his opinion.
Not a bad way to go about it. But I'm going to be right up front with this. Yes. I love 12 Angry Men.
Understandable.
And I honestly didn't know much about it other than what I'd seen on the movie. And my mom talking about how she and her class were very upset that it was chosen as the senior play when she was in high school.
Interesting. Upset. Was it up against other fun plays?
Well, think about it. If you're a theater student and it's a movie or it's a stage play about 12 Angry Men, where are the women in it?
True. However, I have yet to see a high school do a faithful reproduction. In fact, one of the best comments on almost every current critique of this movie was at least one person saying, my high school did this, but we only had 6 people, so we had to double the angry. So I don't think very many people are faithful to the original here in high school.
Yeah, well, I guess hers was, but
they're
not going to pull the anime cross-dressing Romeo and Juliet.
They could.
They could.
Hairspray did it. They could do it.
Fair. But I didn't know that 12 Angry Men originally was a live television play that was aired in 1954.
Sure was.
Before being adapted into the screen for 1957.
Yeah.
And it did come from Reginald Rose's experience in serving as juror in 1954, as well as the McCarthy hearings that took place shortly after that. And it was part of CBS's attempts to translate theatrical drama to television with the growth of home video in the 1950s.
Oh, yeah.
But also, it worked since, at the time, Studio One's flow was from the number one show at the time, I Love Lucy.
Oh, a great show.
And then people just kind of stuck around for whatever was after because they were already there.
True.
Granted, not a lot of stations at the time, but still, you were
I was
already
going to say,
there.
your options were, I think, at the time, 3.
I don't remember. I didn't look it up. But I also learned that 12 Angry Men was part of a trio along with Marty and Patterns that set up the foundation for TV dramas and courtroom procedural shows.
Oh, definitely.
With Patterns being the show that started showing that television drama could be more than a disposable form of entertainment. I mean, we've looked at in the past Doctor Who, we lost a bunch of episodes because they threw them away thinking no one would want to rewatch them.
Very true. And this wasn't like they were taking a shot in the dark at changing from the TV show into the movie. It had also been rewritten for a radio show that was wildly successful and was given a lot of acclamated awards. It was starring Robert Cunnings and, I'm going to butcher this person's name, Franchot, I believe. Franchot Tone. And that came out just a few years, like, right in between the TV and the movie.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't do too much digging from that spark.
I love a radio drama, a radio show. One of my favorite pastimes is listening to, like, The Lone Ranger. So finding out that this was an option, I did listen to it. It is also very good, but it's very similar in the same way the TV version is, in a lot of ways, very similar.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, they knew that they had something that people would be very interested in. They just didn't know how good it was going to be.
Yeah, well, it's not much different than, like, any other radio drama, or now by today's standards, audiobooks.
Very true. And, I mean, this was during a time period where, for the most part, movies were a lot less risky. We were already spending a lot of money on this, and it was with a fairly new director. So
well, it was still risky, because Henry Fonda saw potential in the show to be worked for the silver screen, and United Artists thought it could be marketed like 1955's film Marty, which was wildly successful.
Yes, it was.
But it was also going to have to be made on the cheap,
Mm-hmm.
and with a new director, Sidney Lumet, who had previously worked in television as a director who could come in on schedule and on or under budget.
Fantastic. This is a very impressive first debut for a movie.
Yeah, well, I mean, silver screen movie. He'd done TV production, so like there was a lot of rehearsing and stuff that he did beforehand, so he knew exactly what he was doing getting into this rehearsing, so that way they could, I think they shot it in only 21 days.
Yeah, something like 3 weeks, which is ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And also of note, Voskevec and Weenie, who played Juror 11, and the foreign juror, and Juror 9, who was the man, or the old man, they both were in the original TV version, which, interesting thing about the TV version, too, on top of that, is that it was done live.
Ooh,
so,
very difficult.
Yeah, so it had to be heavily rehearsed, and then, like, sit and cut between commercials, and then return to the exact same position to reroute it.
Very challenging. Also, only 15 minutes were for the TV movies back then, so we were missing a ton of dialogue that, thankfully, this movie version has.
Well, and added to it, because, I mean, you gotta remember, that was the original version, is that TV version, so they expanded upon it just
They definitely did. Though I think Rose talks about how he had a lot of the dialogue, he purposefully knew that he was gonna have to cut down, was glad to add back what he already had, and then wrote more. So, like, we knew that there was going to be, hopefully, a lot more.
You had basically a very, very good rough draft to work with.
They had a great rough draft. And then
draft.
And then they had a second draft with the radio version, which was, I think, a little bit longer, but only by a little tiny bit. It was also a live production, so another version to rehearse. Granted, none of the actors came back, as this was radio, and the crossover for radio and TV movies was pretty low at this point, with the exception of, like, a really big name coming in to, like, guest appear for something. But it still gave them a chance to work through any little hiccups that might happen.
No, I can definitely see that working, so. But before we get into it, Chris, what are we drinking today?
We have water, and we must patiently wait until we have finished this review to get out to listen to... I'm sure there's a ball game on tonight somewhere.
Yeah, I believe baseball has started.
Baseball has started, so someone is playing somewhere tonight.
Yeah, I'm not watching that tonight.
I'm gonna listen to the car at home, I guess? I don't know.
Cheers.
Cheers.
So, the start of 12 Angry Men, I do like how simple it is with the credits proceeding through the courtroom. Good movement to follow people and keep to the flow of room 208. Like, there's a lot of really simple but well done camera work to, like, keep the movement going instead of, like, static shots of people walking up and down hallways.
The camera work in this movie in general is phenomenal.
Oh, it's beautiful. And especially and that's the thing that I love right from the get-go, is how simple 12 Angry Men is.
It really is.
And how, like, little you need to actually make a great, compelling movie.
Oh, yes, because let's be real, there's really only one set for this whole movie. A small courtroom.
Not even a courtroom, a juror room.
A juror room.
Yeah.
Even worse.
But also setting up that the trial's for murder, and that it's putting this heavy tone on the job that the jurors have in front of them. And at this point, we have no personalities, just faces and choosing life and death. Which I also what's interesting about this too is it's a Hispanic kid against 12 white men.
All adult white men too. Like this is not a jury of peers.
No. Well, and so I was kind of curious, and the Hispanic population was growing at this point. It rose from 3.2 million in 1950 to 5.8 million in 1960. And so that's roughly 21 or 32% of the American population. Whereas in New York City alone, that was only about 0.08% of the population. So it was a minority of minorities at that point.
Oh, for sure. But also, we also have to remember, and this is something that I know gets harped on when this movie gets brought up for school lessons, as it did with me. Jury of peers was not really a thing until very recently. Peers was a loosely interpreted and mostly white man thing. And you got who you got, and you didn't complain.
Yeah, well, I mean, could you really complain?
You couldn't. You really couldn't. And this movie does a good job of kind of explaining all of this without really having to, like, hard lay out anything for you. All of these facts are given to us pretty quickly, by just being able to visually see all the jurors file in, them talking about the case pretty loosely, but also because this is adapted from a TV play, essentially, we have play-like qualities where people in the background shuffling, extra noises happening. This feels very natural, like we are just sitting and watching this happen in front of us.
Yeah. Well, and talking about filing them in, I think it's an interesting way to do credits, especially when you go back and watch older movies, and the credits is just a series of text with music behind it.
That's true.
It's mainly showing them filing. It takes a boring segment and gives some movement in the background.
That's true.
And true. And the camera also moves from a top-down overview to tilt and pan to different characters.
Yeah, it goes from this big overarching kind of overview sense into much more personal, like, zoomed in versions of characters, which gives you feel like as a fly on the wall, or as the audience, kind of the idea of when in the movie you should be understanding what is happening, when you should be looking at the big picture versus just focused on a character.
Yes, and at this point it's very zoomed out, kind of bigger picture thing, and that works a lot. That works really well as the evidence gets more and more intense.
Definitely
starts getting closer and closer on the jurors' faces, which we never find out any of the jurors' names, except for
two.
At the very end. But while we're in the room, it is just these nameless people deciding this young man's life.
Very true.
And also, I think what's really interesting, especially when you go back and rewatch it, just the level amount of laissez-faire and joking after being told how serious of a matter this is supposed to be. And and they also gives us an introduction to a lot of these characters, like just a light introduction to their personalities. We got like the advertisement dude, the guy who's only caring about the sports games. We got an advertisement dude. Did I say advertisement?
You did. We got like the nervous guy in the corner.
And then also like the guy who's just kind of bullheaded and wants to get out of there.
And also, I like that this quick overview gives the semblance that this is 12 very similar men with very slight changes in personality, when in reality, once you get to know people, you realize that most people are very different, despite the overarching demographic here.
Yeah, no, exactly. And just like the biggest thing with it too is the simple dialogue that really starts setting how little shits these people give, where there's like, oh, there's so much talk about nothing, and oh, we're lucky to get a murder case. It's easy to it's easy to close. Like, we're going to be in and out of here in 5 minutes.
Which is a very interesting interpretation, because you would think that would be the one you'd want to spend more time being very sure about, as opposed to like a basic civil case is what he's like complaining he didn't get.
Yeah.
It's like, I feel like the civil case would be much, much easier, because usually all the civil cases I've been called for, it's like a show up, oh, the guy didn't come, everybody go home. Like, well,
it's already saying that, hey, he's guilty before they even sit down, because they're not even talking about the case. They're rambling on about their lives and what they're going to do after this.
Very true.
While in front of them is the potential future of someone else.
Very true. And this is a time period where the idea of the electrocution chair was still very fresh in a lot of people's memories and minds. Like, this was something that was still hotly debated. I mean, it is still now today, but this was a newer issue that was being brought forward. And so having that tied nicely and just very, like, loosely into the, the talking points that these characters are having lets the audience know what's at stake, but it gives the characters, for the most part, this sense of liaison where they don't really seem to care.
Except for Henry Fonda's character, who is the only one who is pretty quiet and serious during this, at least, introduction phase.
Very true.
But the other thing I like about 12 Angry Men is how quickly it moves into everything.
It is very quick.
Where, in the very first round of voting, we get all guilty but one.
Yeah. This is very surprising, because this is a 90-minute movie. It does not feel like a 90-minute movie at all. The pacing for a almost entirely dialogue-based film is incredible, and it starts from the beginning.
It's not just almost entirely, it is entirely dialogue-based.
That's true. That is very true.
We're talking about, like, how we talked about how in Tarantino films, he can carry a very long scene with just dialogue about day-to-day life.
True.
This one explores a lot of aspects of life, but from, like, a very narrow view, very narrow point in it.
True.
And I do like that the camera switches against who's voting against the mob, so it's the back of Fonda facing the rest of the room, and he's catty-cornered to the guy who's going to be fighting him the entire time. So it's the longest distance across the table he could be from anyone else. So there's a lot of intentional little details that just really, really make 12 Angry Men that much more interesting.
Oh, most definitely.
And even then, when they're asking, why are you doing this? He's like, I don't know. And it's setting up the consequences of quick decisions without thinking about it with deadly consequences. Yeah.
And granted, that big premise, which is something that the director eventually gets known for, is bringing up this and social issues in general in his movies and films. He puts it behind this idea of, like, truly understanding what it means to have reasonable doubt. And it's a good argument, though granted, the way this movie handles it, according to the lawyer online, maybe a little falsified, maybe a little bit too much drama for realism, but I like it because it does play and give the audience something to think about without having to then sit through a deeper issue and realize what's happening. It gives that over context that then can be applied to other issues later.
Oh, no, exactly. I mean, that's the whole thing with this is the writing of those issues is done in a way, and I know you're going to bitch at me for this a little bit, how in Dungeon Crawler Carl...
Yes, okay, bring up Carl again.
So, like, when they're in the Iron Tangle, there's parts where Carl's explaining a bunch of complicated stuff.
Yes.
But he's explaining it in a way that's more of a discussion, that he knows the answers, but he's explaining to everyone else and us at the same time. And that's how this trial starts working is...
Very true.
We get the little bit signs of racism where I've lived amongst them my whole life. You can't believe a word they say. He's lucky he got a trial.
Which is hilarious because, like, no, luck shouldn't have to do with it. That's the whole base of the judicial system. Like, there's a lot of points that happen here. Not just that, but also, like, there's an ageism to it. Like, he's just a young kid. Yeah, they're impulsive. There's nothing you can do to save him.
Yeah. Well, and that's the other thing, too, is, like, his rough life is shrugged off. And it's that whole point is that he's still facing mob mentality. Even though they're not going to, like, lynch him, it's still a mob mentality against this one person.
Oh, for sure.
And the others still aren't taking it seriously. I mean, hell, one's drawing his advertisement to the other guy, like, here's what I do. Like, no one's actually sitting and listening to anything. And I also like how, like, the head juror brings it up. Or not the head juror, the guy who's just kind of running the meeting. He asks him, or says, perhaps if the gentleman down there who disagrees with us, well, perhaps you could tell us why. Let us know what you're thinking, and we might be able to show you where you're mixed up. So it's putting him in the seat to explain why he believes what he wants against the grain of everything else.
And again, it's proving the idea of, like, a judicial system in a very over-dramatized way, but the idea that proof of innocence is needed as opposed to proof of guilt.
Exactly. And then when asking the others of, like, well, why do you think he's guilty? Others can't articulate it because they're just going with the flow of the rest of the mob.
Especially the one character who's meant to be, like, the shy, meek character. he harps over and over again on, well, I don't know, I can tell.
Mm-hmm.
I can just tell that he's guilty. I could tell from the moment he walked in.
Yeah, exactly. It brings in, like you said, the ageism and the racism that's prevalent in this movie that are important to the rest of the plot of the movie. Because honestly, here's the other thing too: is like while the movie's about a trial, it's not about this trial 100%.
No, it is completely a commentary on the judicial system and the oppressions that happen at a much like less than obvious way. Because I would argue that, with the exception of maybe one guy who, I think at the beginning, none of them would argue they are against this kid specifically for his age or his race. That is what is happening. They've made a quick judgment, and it will impact him for the rest of his life. They are thinking about what they're going to do in 30 minutes.
Yeah, and in a way, this movie's also kind of set up like an essay, where...
Oh, very much so.
We get this first introduction to kind of the rough idea of what's happening, and then we're presented, okay, well, here's the evidence. Here's all the evidence that we just went through, and it's a way to tell the audience of like, okay, here's the facts that are going to be in question, done in 2 and 3 minutes, rather than drawing it out across the entire movie of, oh, here's the next surprise, here's the next piece of evidence, all given to you right from the get-go.
And using it this way, where now that we have all of our evidence straight up, and the rest of the movie plays off of breaking down each one of those pieces of evidence, instead of having this movie be solely focused on just the 1 or 2 issues of the ageism and racism of the movie, it changes it into a purely social and judicial issue by proving that, like, the system here is what is failing this young man.
Yeah. Because
they go on, and it's all the way at the end, once all of everything has been talked about and they go through everything, that they're like, wow, this guy's lawyer's shitty.
Yeah, well,
this poor kid, like, has the worst representation.
They even bring that up a little bit, too, and there's also a little bit of light sexism in it, where,
definitely,
like, in preference of believing an old woman, because they believe this old woman's story, and they even bring up, you don't believe the boy's story, but you believe hers, even though she's one of them.
Yeah, for sure.
And then also, so when I talk about how this movie is supposed to be a little bit of a thesis, is when our main character, Fonda's character, brings up that he can't find a motive. That's kind of like his thing of like, I just don't see it. Like, none of this adds up to me 100%.
Sure.
So we need to re-examine this. And that's the other thing is like, he's the only one who cares, again, as it continues to build around everyone not giving a shit, while they start bringing up other stuff like, oh, he has a criminal history too. And it's always, going to your ageism thing, they bring up, it's always the kids are wrong, not the same as our generation. Our generation respected our parents.
That's true. And it is interesting as well, because you can see, if you watch this movie from an interest in like mob mentality, you can see pretty clearly where the voice of 2 gets echo chambered around because others don't want to disagree. So there's really only 2 characters who constantly are complaining that, like, oh, well, kids these days, or those people, or I know what's happening here, and then everyone else is just not wanting to disagree. And you can see it from the beginning in just simple little things that don't even matter, like, oh, are you a baseball fan? Oh, not really. Well, I am. I'm going to this thing later. Which team do you vote for? Like, which one do you like? I guess I like this team. Like, you can see how it's being shaped, but it's done in such a natural way that unless you're watching for that interaction, you very easily fall into this idea of like, well, no, all of them said that. Yeah. All of them came to this opinion on their own.
Well, and I think you're getting at a good point here, is like where the little details that they add to it, because Fonda's character says, I think you're missing the point here, right after the primary antagonist juror connects this story to his own son. And so it's like the little clever writing that like builds up. It's like, it's very poignant. And then when you rewatch, it's like, okay, you're hinting at a lot of stuff early on before we even get to the meat of this movie.
And it's this extra meat that really rounds out these characters. After listening to the radio version and getting as what I could from the TV version of it, they were good. Like, they were clearly well written. You do get the sense of what this movie ended up being, but you are missing those details that really make each one of these jurors feel like a very fleshed out and relatable person in a different way. having one who feels very timid, doesn't want to go against the grain, having one who this is very personal for him in some almost unrelated way, but he's making it about himself, but he doesn't want to admit that, he doesn't want to talk about that.
Or he doesn't even realize it yet.
And no, he doesn't. And then having these other guys who are just not even really paying attention, they're just kind of going with the flow, like, oh, the majority say guilty, let's get out of here.
Yeah, it's, the circumstantial evidence sounds good. It's coming to a conclusion before you have evidence.
And then throughout the whole thing, having more than just one juror be like the know-all. Granted, there's one who's definitely leading the cause, who's asking the most questions, but more than one of them picks a separate point that to recognize as like a fault with the evidence. So like having a different one having the old man be the one to recognize the glasses for the woman.
Mm-hmm. The old disheveled man who obviously he's lonely, so of course he wants the attention.
Yeah, or having one talk about how like it is very strange that his defendant isn't doing his job. Him being able to find the knife that we're about to see, like, that raises some questions for at least two of the jurors.
Well, and it also sets up how interpretations of movies in general, too, where they say it isn't an exact science, and that's why it's important to focus on the little details of what makes this important, what makes this, quote-unquote, art or a science.
Very true.
And yeah, as you said, the knife is the first piece of evidence we get, which it starts building up kind of like, okay, it's an unusual knife, diverging narratives, and a little bit of police brutality brought in too.
Definitely.
Bringing up some of the later evidence of questioning the movies because no one saw him there. Like, it's like, okay, well, this kid is off on his own. How do you have an alibi if no one remembers, or you're not out with people?
Yeah.
And the knife's even wiped. But they also, that's the other thing too, is at the beginning they start downplaying this kid's intelligence. Yes. And that's where Fonda's character comes in and starts bringing this humanity to this nameless boy on trial, where he's like, he's had a hard life. I mean, you think in his rage he would come back to wipe the knife.
Hours later, too.
Yeah. I mean, and also on top of that, where he's like, when he stabs the knife into the desk, there's that really dynamic and sharp moment.
It is. And this is the scene that I had questions on whether or not this was legal. And the answer, undoubtedly, according to the lawyer online, is no. You cannot go find your own evidence as a juror to bring. You can make your own conclusions. It is heavily frowned upon, if not grounds for dismissal or mistrial, to go visit the scene of the crime by yourself as a juror.
But he didn't. But that's the other thing too, is like, he didn't visit the scene of the crime. He just circled the neighborhood and found a similar knife. He's not finding evidence. He's finding information that counters it.
I agree with you. However, according to the internet man, this is grounds for a mistrial and a new jury to be found.
Yeah, maybe get a better lawyer at that point.
And hopefully get a better lawyer. Though I don't know if that's how that works. I think you get to keep your same shitty lawyer and you get new shitty jurors. Who are maybe less shitty? I don't know.
Well, either way, it's a really cool moment because...
It's so dramatic, too, because honestly, for a legal drama, this isn't a very dramatic movie. It's a honestly fairly straightforward plot with not straightforward characters, and that's what's interesting.
Exactly. But like in like the whole turnaround too with that, like it's the slight dramatics that they have with it, where he's just like flick, throw down, and everyone's like, where did you get that? Like this is supposed it's supposed to be a very unique knife, but he's found the duplicate of it basically.
Yeah, it's the equivalent of having that like souvenir that you're like, I got this unique Eiffel Tower reconstruction from Paris, and everyone's like, yeah, they sell those on Amazon for like 5 cents.
Well, and also there's an interesting bit with this too, where it's not just, while it focuses on the knife, Fonda's character is the only one getting close-ups, like he's the one on trial, like the kid.
And we've moved past a point too of it just being a more focused on the character and almost claustrophobic with how close the camera is getting at times, which adds again to the level of intensity and drama, which for a movie that has no courtroom yelling, no like
objection.
No, you can't handle the truth sort of style, like, which is honestly a pretty hallmark thing for most legal dramas, is like there is some big blowout, there's a lot of court dates, there's honestly usually even some out of court drama that then like you have to deal with the consequences.
Mm-hmm.
This is happening in one room in a fairly civilized manner. This is the most drama we get, and the camera is helping immensely.
Exactly. And that's like the little detailing that I talk about that really goes into this.
Yeah. And the other detailing is we all start off in full 50s, 60s style suits, and as this movie goes, people are getting hotter and hotter because there's no AC and we're in New York, and so the coats start slowly like disappearing and everyone becomes less professional looking. They're all less suited up.
And the fan's not working either, too.
Yeah, they're very toasty.
That is another nice little detail of like as the tension builds, so does their perspiration.
Yeah. And their desperation to leave, because they've now missed dinner, they're missing the game, it's hot as hell in here.
It's not yet.
Not yet, but they are already talking about, like, hey, we should speed this up, because, like, I don't want to miss the game after this.
Yeah, well, and that's the other thing, too, is, like, it allows side arguments and side chatter to happen, but then reels it back in, and it does it, as it does it, the side arguments become less and less as everyone becomes more and more invested in the case, too.
Well, and the other thing that I really like about this version, this idea of a legal drama, where the idea is to not have doubt as opposed to proof, means that we don't have to necessarily in any way make an interesting or complicated murder. We can have very basic evidence that just gets mishandled or misrepresented or not shown correctly, and then just little things that should have already been dealt with for this case. That's the interesting part, which honestly I kind of like. It's very refreshing as opposed to like a whodunit where we didn't know that it was the cab driver from the first 2 seconds of the film.
Yeah, it was like when I watched Knives Out for the first time.
Which, don't get me wrong, I love Knives Out, but much more complicated.
Much more complicated, and then I realized it's just Columbo, basically.
It is a play on Columbo with a delightful Agatha Christie twist.
Yeah, exactly.
And like I get that the idea of Columbo or even Agatha Christie is not to know who done it, whereas with a legal drama, it's really more of a are you guilty or not guilty? There's no question on who. Usually. It's the drama around the case. And the drama here is the evidence itself and a little bit of the jurors' lives leaking into this.
Very little, though.
But enough that you can see how your own biases might cause problems without even realizing it.
And on top of that, it's such a little bit of every character that it's able to touch on such a broad commentary on the society as a whole.
And just when you think you have forgotten, or one juror out of these 12 is not actually like a rememberable character, a new piece or a new perspective is brought forward. Like, I would watch this and I would be writing out my thoughts, and I'd be like, oh, who was that juror? Oh, it was the juror with the accent. I had kind of forgotten he had that insight.
Well, that's what's nice too, is that it adds little caricatures of, or like just little bits of identity that you can be like, okay, you don't have to know the name. It's like, okay, here's the foreign juror, here's the racist juror, here's the sports fan, here's the nerdy one, here's the head one. Like, I mean, you can go through all 12 of them, but
no, it is really nice because it doesn't rely on us actually knowing any of the juror numbers, because we don't need that as their identification. But we also don't really lose anyone. Granted, some characters in the movie definitely stand out more. We have our lead antagonist and protagonist, of course. But all 12 of these jurors feel like they are bringing something important to the table at one point or another throughout this trial.
Exactly. Just enough, though.
Yeah. And it's really interesting because that one insight, that one piece of personal perspective that each one brings is just enough to sway, not even necessarily themselves, but sway a different juror's opinion. Which is so interesting.
And provide like a slightly different insight into the case.
Exactly.
And instead of making it the one-dimensional guilty, not guilty.
Definitely.
And that's where the first act ends, with another vote. And I like how, even though he's not convinced, if everyone else complies and the vote's the same, he's like, okay, I guess I'll go through with it. I won't hold you guys up anymore.
And the other thing that I like is that we go ahead and make this an anonymous vote. Because at the beginning, when they are all talking, part of that mob mentality is having no animosity. or not animosity, but
you have anonymity where they do a written vote for the first round too.
Yeah, but when they first walk into this room to discuss the case, because that's kind of all they're talking about is like their personal stuff that they're allowed to, like the games, their job, that sort of thing, and this case, they all feel like they know each other well enough to be able to like say, oh, we are one unit mind, and then there's the one outsider. And now that it is a written in situation where they feel like they can have just a little bit of bravado, now there is potential for doubt.
Well, and that's the thing too, is like they talk about superficial stuff early on. It has nothing to do with the case.
Exactly.
And that's the other thing too with this is with Fonda, you can really see the worry on his face of like he is worried about this kid, and the fate of the kid is based off of this one vote. And I also do like that. So spoilers, there's a second not guilty, but I do like that instead of how you'd see in other movies where building the suspense, this does nothing to do with it. It just does it very methodically of like just straightforward reading the votes, and that the second not guilty isn't the last vote. It's like the third to last vote, because I feel if you put it on that last one, it's too cheesy of like...
It would be very cheesy. And this also changes our sense of who the main juror or the main protagonist of the movie is. Because if it had always been just that one guy holding his ground for the whole movie, trying to prove everyone else wrong, it wouldn't have been about the judicial system anymore. It would have been about him. You
know what movie does that?
Which one?
God's Not Dead.
Yeah, okay, well, all of them. All of the God's Not Dead franchise. But yeah, but that's the difference between having a movie that's its message is about the injustices built into our society and the judicial system versus the potential persecution conflict of Christianity.
Yeah, search for truth instead of evangelical preachings.
Yeah, the idea that also, like, not having proof is all the proof one needs versus having doubt is allowed. Like, those two concepts are very different in a legal drama sense. And honestly, those are they're opposites, but there's so many that fall kind of in between. But I would argue that in between is why a lot of them don't get brought up, with the exception of a couple of outstanding movies. Most legal drama cases or movies are a lot like Hallmark films or World War II movies, whether or not you like that comparison. But they are, because you can do so many of them, and with the exception of a handful for either acting or social relevance or political timing, most of them kind of all end up being about the same.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. I mean, granted, courtroom dramas aren't exactly the thing I tend to follow, but...
No, but let's not lie. I watched enough of that TV show where it's just the Navy courtroom.
Jag?
Yeah, I watched a lot of Jag growing up.
I vaguely remember seeing it on AFN.
Yeah, it was more my dad's show, but it was on, so we were watching it.
That, and what was the other one? Law and Order?
Watched a lot of Law and Order, man. A lot of Law and Order. And honestly, don't get me wrong, I enjoyed those, but I would argue that most courtroom movies, most legal drama movies fall closer to that in its styling, where, like, the court drama is over the top, there's a lot of questionable motives and reality, whereas this one goes so far on the other end where, like, the drama is almost non-existent in reality. Like, this is just 12 guys who can't make up their minds.
Yeah, you should watch the Ace Attorney live action.
I should watch the Ace Attorney live action, because I do like Ace Attorney.
It's like $2 on Amazon, and it's Takashi Miike.
Well, that sells it for me.
It is bad, but great.
Well, Ace Attorney I don't expect to be good, so I'll take it.
But I do like that when it's revealed that there's the second not guilty, the relief on Fonda's face is so great, and then
fantastic acting.
Immediately, the main antagonist juror is asking for like a witch hunt.
He's so mad.
Oh,
he's so angry. But it's okay. But the way that he is angry feels like someone that where they are just so hot-headed. They are so quick-tempered, and you can tell from this point forward that, like, it is now so much more obvious that he, without necessarily realizing it, has been influencing everyone around him.
Well, and also, the other thing, too, with it, too, is the mob mentality starts to break down, where there's that infighting of, oh, there's one against us without civil discourse. Let's start turning on each other. And it takes the old man standing up and like, well, why did you vote? And he's like, well, he convinced me. He found another knife that looked exactly the same. So how unique is this knife? Maybe we're missing some other evidence.
And it's interesting that, honestly, this case truly does not have a ton of evidence for it, which in a legal sense makes it much more interesting, because they're trying to put this kid away on 2 witness statements and a knife, which not a lot to go on here in reality. But the fact that, like, you can break all 3 of those pieces of evidence down in so many different ways, in honestly 12 ways, because each one of those pieces has a different point of view that eventually changes one of the jurors' minds.
Yeah, well, and it's the way it's changing is it starts very small with the rippling of it's the guy next to him, which is a nice little symbolism of it's the guy right next to him, and his influence is slightly spreading.
And I also think that it's interesting that throughout the movie, it starts with them filing in and agreeing to sit in numerical order because they don't know each other's names. It's not allowed. So they're just going to sit in juror number order. And then as the conversations get heated, as they get up to have bathroom breaks or go take a smoke break or whatever, the order of them sitting shuffles around. And it's never intentional. It's never pointed out to the audience in such a way that you feel like it's a clear us versus them. But the way that it moves the room around keeps the camera moving, keeps you feel like you're still moving, even though we don't change sets at all.
I think all the characters take their same seats, though.
But they're, like, one will...
But they mingle.
Yeah, they mingle. One will go and stand over by the window. One will head out, which makes it feel like there's now a space between 2 of them.
Okay.
It's very clever the way that, like, it feels like everything still is shifting throughout, so that way you don't feel bored. Or that you're, like, just sitting there in a conference room.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and that's what leads to, like, the next break. And before that, there was a line that I like, too, is the main antagonist says, emotional appeal influenced you, and it's...
yeah, but, like, it's an interesting thought, too, because, again, this movie touches on a ton of social issues in general, and making decisions emotionally is honestly, a quieter but important one for this movie.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason this movie has such a strong stay. So many years later.
Oh, for sure.
Also, one other thing that I do want to point out, this is a rare good movie where the main character is an architect.
Oh, and is not the worst asshole we've ever seen.
And it's because the movie isn't about him being an architect and being a preachy asshole.
Oh, thank God, because honestly, like, we probably could have gone this whole movie without knowing what his job is, and it would have been all the same.
Okay, actually, I'm gonna be a little...
Yeah, put it out there.
I think part of the reason him being an architect works so well with it, too, and knowing it, is because you know and I know that our position in our field is we have to be looking at the holistic picture. So we're looking at mechanical, electrical, structural, all these other finishes and bullshit that we have to deal with.
That's true. And I do think that the term and position of architect looks different in 1950s lens than it does now.
Yeah.
The 1950s architect was a big shot. It was someone who knew how to question things. They were very highly educated usually. They were usually well respected, usually.
Are you saying we're not highly educated?
We're
not respected?
Respected, maybe not. But I would argue that the term and use of architect in society now looks different than it did in the 50s, especially based off of all of the movies and literature that was based around architecture in this and the glamification of it in the 50s and 40s.
I'm going to argue against you because I think we are heavily biased because we work in the industry. On the outside, it still looks very impressive.
It does still look impressive. However, I would argue that there has not been a book or movie about the glamour of the architect in the last 20 years.
You're wrong.
Which one?
The Brutalist.
Okay. Fair. Brutalist. I would argue that the Fountainhead shaped most people's interpretation in the 50s and 60s.
Yeah, well...
Along with the characters like Frank Lloyd Wright.
Yeah, the Starchitects were much bigger names, especially the arts and crafts movement.
And remember, like, this movie is not for people who actually know architecture. This is a title alone.
Yeah.
No, and so, like, the impersocation here is that, like, this is a big fancy man.
Yeah.
And I think honestly I honestly do think a different career would be picked for this movie today. For this character. I think potentially given like a different title or add on to the title of architect. Like, oh, I've heard your name in the paper, or oh, aren't you the guy who made such and such? Like, more would have been added to get the same level of impression.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, but that's just me overstretching maybe just a little bit.
Well, okay, but it's also an interesting take though, because again, this is meant to be a jury of peers for this 16-year-old Hispanic kid from the slums, and they've brought out a architect, a retired old man, an advertiser, a retired baseball coach, I think, or just coach in general.
I think he just coaches at the high school, so he's probably a gym teacher.
Okay, so like a gym teacher who's really full of himself, and then like assumed other positions of like basic middleman, and like this is like none of these people work anywhere near the neighborhood of this kid.
Well, we'll get to it.
That we are told at this point.
One of them doesn't work near, but he has a history with it.
Exactly. Which, again, we don't know about, because, like, it's all been focused on these, like, two guys who won't shut the hell up.
And it's all, these little reveals are all about humanizing the man on trial.
And the jurors, or the witnesses, too. Mm-hmm. Because from this point, like, we've seen the conflict with the knife now, and it brings in, for the audience, good, like, oh, we should be questioning this stuff, but man, it is really hard to doubt witness testimony. We have two. We have an old man who claims to have heard it, and we have a lady or a woman who has claimed to say it. And at this point, it's just woman. It's not even elderly yet.
No, exactly. And also, there's nice little details where others are moving on from what they will do after this, where they're kind of starting to get invested. Mm-hmm. But it always comes back to putting the question on Fonda's character of, what if you are wrong?
Which is an interesting take, because the what if you are wrong is he goes out and kills, he doesn't have a second dad to kill.
Yeah.
So, like, I don't know, what if I'm wrong? And granted, the movie does a great job of not actually addressing that question, because that question is obviously a red flag to divert attention from the actual issues happening before them, right? But it's a common one, and honestly, the answer to it is a pretty straightforward one, but it doesn't answer the questions that the movie's trying to bring light to. So why bother with it at all?
Well, because that's the importance, is you have to dig for the details.
That's true, and the more interesting details start appearing with the witness testimonies. This is the part that I think is very well thought through.
Yep, the downstairs neighbor hearing through the floor and seeing the man run away, and a woman seeing it all happen through a train.
Which is very impressive, and also not the first time this has happened. There's an entire plot of Agatha Christie where she's on one train and the other train going the other way, and she sees someone be murdered. It's a very good book. One of my favorites.
It sounds like what I know of. I haven't seen the movie, but Woman on the Train.
That might be based off of what Miss McGillicuddy saw, which is, I believe, the name of the book. It's one of my favorites from Agatha Christie. But, like, the idea that, like, oh, there's an obstacle between you, and you can see so clearly that you can tell a murder has happened. And in this case, it's identify the murderer and know for sure. Whereas in the other example I have is more of like I know something happened, I have no idea who, I just saw the horrible deed.
Yeah, it's piecing together the evidence themselves.
And I also love that, like, the details of these witnesses are so non-existent. We really get told, like, just woman and old man who lives below him. Mm-hmm. And, like, there's no really defining features or details that they're given. It's almost like they weren't really paying attention to what these people looked like or said. Yeah. They just heard, I saw him do it, and said good enough.
Exactly. It's the combining of events for a holistic picture instead of individual items that are like, okay, this individual item, they all must be true.
Yes.
And I also do like that as we're progressing, they're playing tic-tac-toe, and the very blatant part in this where he's like, this isn't a game. Yeah. But the antagonist guy is also disrespectful to the elderly as well, where he's preaching about...
He's so rude to everyone.
But that's the thing, too, is he's such a hypocrite in everything he does. It's why I think it's great, because there's a part where, like, they're learning about the motivations. It's like, they heard, oh, I'll kill you from upstairs, turning it around later on. Uh-huh. And this is where, like, the old man it's important to pay attention to everything. Mm-hmm. It switches from Fonda's character being the sole person on the defense to now he's got someone else in his corner pointing out, like, by the way, did you see that old man? Did you see that his shirt was a little frayed? Like,
yeah, he wasn't all put together. He had a bit of a limp. And I like that this is the part of the movie where instead of having the jurors all feel a connection to the person on trial, it changes it to, oh, you also have a connection to the witnesses. Because the old man recognizes that old man's style. He's like, I am him.
mm-hmm.
And I might lie a little bit for some fame and recognition because I'm all alone.
Yeah, I mean, hell, you see it in society. Everyone's trying to get their 5 minutes of fame. The only one I heard recently, the Hawktula girl.
Oh, yeah. You know what? Do your thing, girl.
I guess she's heading to jail, but, like...
Well, you know what? She had her minute of fame, though. And, like, that, it's interesting because the old man is like, it's not that he wants fame, it's just that he wants attention. And you see it with kids all the time where, like, they will do anything, even if it's naughty, to get attention. This old guy is so alone, and he feels like he hasn't accomplished anything in his life.
Mm-hmm.
He probably really does think that he is helping this case.
Yeah, helping as best he can to serve his community.
Yeah, and I like how each character very carefully puts their perspective in, with the exception of the angriest juror,
mm-hmm.
who is kind of blindly raging throughout this. Each one puts their own perspective in delicately, in a way that then you can see the connection as opposed to the overstepping.
Yeah, there's a good train of logic behind every single line of dialogue in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
And even though it's not a comedic movie, there is a little...
There's some, though.
There's one line of comedy that I appreciate where the racist bad English is corrected by a foreigner.
Which is pretty funny. No, there's some... And it's always in the details, too. Because at this point, there's also been more and more talks about how hot it is in here.
Mm-hmm.
And every time it's brought up, the timeline for this movie extends a little bit. Like, oh, well, you're right. Like, oh, the game could be starting soon. Let's get done in 30 minutes. And then it gets extended. Oh, it's getting hot in here. Yeah, but, you know, we could open the windows and make it another 45 minutes.
Do you want to order dinner? No, let's wait till 7.
Yeah. Like the time frame keeps extending, and each time it does, no one feels like it's, you know, oh, that's really far away, because they keep extending it by these little chunks.
Exactly. Or they're forced to extend it.
Or they're forced to, yeah.
And there's other little bits in this, too, where they bring up his loyal, or, like, what side is he on? He's like, I don't have loyalty to one side or the other. I'm just asking questions. He's very much personifying what it means to actually be an unobjective juror.
Mm-hmm.
Like, looking at the evidence, questioning it until there is no doubt.
And
there is a doubt.
And I would argue that it is a commentary on society in general, not just the judicial system.
Oh, yeah.
Because each one of these jurors is now making judgment on not just the person on trial, but their neighbors and the other jurors at the table. Because you can see that as each one of them talks, like the old man's the first one to speak up and say, well, I recognize that the old guy's maybe not fully truthful about what he can see or hear or do, because I'm him. I also fib a little bit.
Well,
and you can see that all of them, instead of, you know, shunning him, they now seem to have a more, like, actual connection to him.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's a better understanding of him.
Well, and it's also something you see nowadays in social media where people post just the catchiest thing to get attention, or...
You only see, like, the positives, too, of someone's, like, post, right? Like, you only see the pictures of vacation that were good.
Yeah, that, or... in the more political side of things, where people post something without doing any research.
Oh,
you see a lot of it on both sides, and it gets...
Yeah.
It's still prevalent. That's why 12 Angry Men is still prevalent. It's these little ideas that can be extrapolated and applied to the rest of society today still.
And the idea that a side is not a hard line.
Exactly.
Yeah, it is very interesting.
And I do like that how this movie builds up the rage to fever pitches and then suddenly stops it every time for a vote.
And the vote always feels fair because, again, the mob mentality is still present, just not as extreme. But the mob mentality now gets moved to vote, and the paralysis of mob mentality means that the vote happens each time.
Mm-hmm.
They could, especially the angry guy, could say, no, I don't think we should vote right now. None of us have agreed to anything.
And that's why, like, well, hey, we need to reset where we're at in this case, and it's always after each round of evidence. And on top of that, what they do, too, is there's these couple characters who are wishy-washy.
They go back and forth.
But it's a good representation of someone who wasn't invested, but they're on the fence one way or the other. And what evidence is going to push them this way or that way.
And it's also interesting to see where each juror finally takes an actual interest in the case. Because there's some that seem wishy-washy, but it's just because they haven't fully invested yet. And then there's some that take almost to the end of the movie to truly feel like they're making any progress with listening to the evidence that's being built. Because they'll have picked one piece that they feel is the most important piece.
Yes, exactly. Again, focusing on the specific little details instead of the holistic picture. And I do like that every time there's that little bit more. When we get to the old man running towards the door, setting up like, okay, well now he's got to walk and like trying to test it out. I do find it funny that they use Fonda's character for this instead of the old man that they have. Yeah,
especially because the old guy's like, yeah, him and I, we both have the same aches, about the same age.
Well, and on top of that, the antagonist guy is yelling at him, oh, he walked faster than that. You're just going slow to prove a point.
Which is such a coach behavior. I love that. Love that detail.
But it's a good way to test it out of like, hey, you're actually working through the evidence instead of here's the knife. Okay, here's us actually really like physically working through this. And then again, the antagonist making it more personal of he's gonna slip through our fingers, and then the response of, are you his executioner? I'm one of them. And it's this seeking to spread the blame as it isn't me sending this kid to his death, but it's we all did this.
Yeah. It's an us, and then also realizing that it's starting to realize that their personal connections and troubles are not just keeping them from thinking clearly about this case like the other jurors were having questions or not having doubts where they should, but having a vindication of some kind and seeing how that can blind you.
Oh yeah, no, exactly. I mean, that's the thing too, is like being blinded by the facts or being blinded by your own prejudice. The antagonist guy is like getting pissy and he's like, I'll kill you. And then Fonda's character was like, what did you just say? You said that. That's what he said. That's his. Again, it's taking that one little bit of evidence where that's supposed to be the damning plot of, I heard him say, I'll kill you.
And the acting for all of this is phenomenal because there is such a good balance between almost like wide-eyed observer from some of the jurors versus the poking and prodding of our main antagonist juror, and then just the way the rage is portrayed with our angry juror. Yeah,
well, that's the thing is like he builds it up to make it personal, and then they have to reel it back to, okay, it's going to be about the facts now.
And each time they do that, instead of truly moving, you can see that like his acting, instead of letting that movement happen, you can see in his acting how well he portrays that like stubbornness, how well he's like trying to like be set in the, well, you can't catch me being wrong. So even when he catches him with the, oh, you said you're going to kill me and you didn't actually mean it. He's so angry and the acting is so good that you can see him pushing the brakes and being like, no, this is my freeze moment in my anger. As opposed to just like playing the anger in, I think, a more natural like acting sense. There's that deeper thought process that these actors took with each one of these motives.
Exactly. And then on top of those motives that it's building, there's this storm approaching in the background. The game gets canceled out, but as they're opening the windows to like get ventilation,
now it's moist.
Well, you also start to hear the rain. Well, rain can be cooling too, but
yeah.
But you hear the rain start to patter, and like eventually it starts building up into a roar as like
the full thunder,
as the only sound in the background, because there's no music for this movie except for like the very beginning and very
there's
end.
Just an end credit card song, yeah.
Exactly, but it's also a good symbolic of the tides turning, of the storm approaching, gaining support. And the close-ups keep getting more continuously used as it becomes more personal and not anonymous votes anymore. We're done with the anonymous votes. Everyone's voting guilty or not guilty from here on out.
But again, like the movie has written this so smartly in that like now there is a small group either way. So that way, again, that mob mentality can't take over anymore. You now feel empowered because you have at least one other person. You know you have at least one other person in your camp.
Yeah. Well, so you say that one person in every camp. At this part 2 is like where they're kind of splitting off a little bit. The architect main juror goes to one corner and someone else goes to the coal again. The head juror goes to the architect and like they just have kind of a brief little conversation, gives a little bit more character to the head juror. But the antagonist goes to the guy at the water cooler trying to convince him to come over to his side, where he's making it 100. Like, once they leave the table, those two are making
a pact.
No,
Is the goal?
They're not making a pact. They're leaving the court. They're leaving the trial at the table, whereas the other guy is making everything outside of that table about the case or about himself, basically.
Oh, for sure.
And again, the rain continues to build and building the heaviness and the pressure, and then the motive becomes in question. It's like how one can forget over time too. Like, the logical line of questioning, giving doubt as proving the point, and building up the sweat on everyone's brow. It's like, this is really getting into the fever pitch. Into the knife comes back in again with the stab wound in question.
Yes.
Which none others are bringing into question too, but it's such a tense and good moment when he builds up the knife. And it's just like, okay, this works so well. Like, it's such a great moment to the movie.
Oh, it adds so much, because again, this is a pretty fairly straightforward plot with interesting characters, but nothing over dramatic like what we think of today. None of these are the star guy. None of these are on trial themselves. They're not a famous person in any way, as far as we know. And so having this moment be the most dramatic thing is just them reviewing the evidence. Yeah.
Well, you're reviewing the evidence and then in realizing some things about themselves, because one of the jurors, he lived in the slums. He lived the same way this kid did. And so there's a little empathy starting to build for this kid of okay, maybe his hard life did put him in this rough position, that maybe he's just a victim of circumstance. And then on top of that, where the tide really starts turning is when the racist dude really exposes himself to the point where no one wants to indulge him. It's starting to push the prejudice that everyone else was originally having in obscuring the truth, humanizing the potential victim of this group.
Yeah, and really bringing to light this idea that you might think in a group that everyone thinks like you to some extent. And once you really break it down, you realize that a lot of these guys are very different. They just have to come to an agreement on this case.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's like when you see some of these counterculture movements, with the punk group where, you have to be X, Y, and Z to be punk. And you start making conformist rules and stuff to follow the group, and then you get pissy when you find out a lot of the old original punk guys are actually conservative guys who were just looking for an out for their frustrations.
Yeah, it's an interesting take to... They all thought they had an idea of who these people were, because everyone came in their suits, they were picked as a juror, they all kind of look similar, and now that they've had both the time and the pressure and the openness to talk about how, well, I'm not actually doing well. Oh, I grew up in a situation like this. I am a foreigner. I kind of get where this kid's coming from in some sense. Having those different openings and being vocal and open with them changes this group dynamic drastically, as opposed to just a group of jurors. Now we have individuals.
Exactly. Thinking for themselves too, because, and that's the thing, it's still a hung jury, because our last bit of evidence, the woman across the street viewed it. Which, again, back to the detail, throwing out all evidence and hanging it on this one piece, because that's the antagonist. He's like, but the woman saw it. She had to have seen it, even though they've gone through all the facts. And it's like, no, there's nothing about this. It's turning it into he's internalizing it and making this all a personal attack on himself.
And once again, it is an interesting take on profiling people and how you think you know someone. They think they know her because she came dressed well, she looks somewhat young, she looks nice, despite all of their other prejudices happening. And then they start breaking down the details where he goes, well, she gave us her birthday. During the introductions.
She's Velma. Do you sleep in your glasses? No, I don't sleep in my glasses.
Yeah. Or she's clearly done a ton of makeup that she's not normally used to wearing. You can tell she's uncomfortable with it. You can tell that the clothes are brand new and that this is a style she probably doesn't normally buy. Yeah.
Well, even going back to a detail we missed where they're talking about the movies. He's like, well, what did you do yesterday? Repeats it. Well, what did you do the day before? Well, we went and saw this movie. And he can't remember every single little detail about the movie. It just that little bit of okay, maybe a witness isn't always credible.
And the fact that especially now, they've come to this point where there's about 3 and definitely 1 who are hung on this one part, right? This one detail, and it's an interesting reversal of the beginning where 1 was not convinced because there was something not quite right.
Mm-hmm.
And now there is one thing not quite right, but they're hung up on it.
No, well, that's the thing is, like, once it gets to this point, everyone else, all the evidence has been discredited, and now it's on to the antagonist guy, and he's the only one left.
And it's interesting because now, even though we call him the antagonist, he's only the antagonist because he will not let his own feelings out of the way.
Exactly. And he's the main one fighting against our main character.
Oh, definitely, but he does so in such a characteristic way of that one guy who's very brass, he's always been in charge, and he's got some anger issues.
Well, it also makes him kind of the protagonist with his growth and everything.
Definitely.
And in a way, everyone's kind of a little slight protagonist because they realize something about themselves. They grow at one point or another in the movie, and that's where, like, Fonda's character, he's not a protagonist, he's just the main character pushing the plot and questioning what's wrong and right.
And I would argue that even though his character is necessary to move the plot along, he's arguably the least interesting character because he has no growth or change, really. Because his whole role is just to start the train going.
Yeah, he starts the emotional ties into the case.
Yeah, everyone else then has time to either reveal something about themselves, learn something about themselves, or in our final guy's case, release something. Be like, I have to let this go. This is interfering with my life.
Well, he has to install everyone else with 100% guilt now instead of where everyone else has now been installed with guilt. It's also a good way to positive, I guess, peer pressure and influence where it's like it's not so much groupthink. It's gone from groupthink to a bunch of individuals coming to a understanding that there's a lot more in question than what was presented to them.
Definitely.
And I do like that under pressure it's revealed that it was personally all about his son this
whole
entire time. It was never about the case.
Which is interesting because I think he probably did not truly realize it until over halfway through this movie.
No, he doesn't.
The character does not realize that this is happening to him.
He doesn't realize it until the end when he's yelling about it. And he's like, "You raised them," and he goes on this tangent. It's not about the evidence anymore. It's a tangent about his son, and that's when he realizes, I'm in the wrong here. I've made this case personal, even though I have a shitty relationship with my son. Maybe because you're an asshole, but...
Let's be real. Probably because this guy's an asshole. But I would like to say that, the symbolism of him, letting out this anger and this frustration in front of a room full of now a group that has silently agreed to not judge each other based off of their backgrounds or their personal lives because they've had to reveal just enough about themselves to say why a piece of evidence either is correct or isn't correct.
Yeah, it humanizes every single aspect about this case instead of making it cold, hard, 100% truth.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well, there's doubt because I'm as valuable as this person that's a piece of evidence.
Exactly. And so while we are never given any conclusion to these characters after this is over, it is a nice thought that maybe this guy's had a breakthrough in his life and he goes home and makes it up to his son.
Yeah. Well, and that's the other thing, too. So how this movie ends, we get this music that comes back in, making it a little bit hopeful.
And I love that they also don't waste time. The moment he's like, fine, not guilty, they're like, we're ready to call it. Go, go, go.
Well, they are, but as they linger, Fonda's character, even though that guy was an asshole to him through the entire trial, he goes and is kind to him. There's this little bit of I get it, this wasn't about you. He still has there's that personal relationship of it's over, you can move on with life and whatnot.
Yeah.
And when they exit, they finally learn, the old man and Fonda's character tell each other's names,
but that's it,
and they move on.
They move on. And granted, in 1950s, having a last name is enough to be able to look someone up and find them, even in a city like New York City. But it's the equivalent of being like, hey, you want to Facebook add someone real quick? And then probably never talking to them again.
Yeah, well, it gives the two people who connected initially, it gives them something to tie in. But I like how this movie ends because it doesn't return to the kid that the whole trial circled around.
We never see him.
But it leaves it open and hopeful now that we don't see him. He has potential in the future. You don't give a face to like what he receives or like what he's going to do with the rest of his life, because it's not a movie about him. It's a movie about seeking justice and truth and moving on with your life and not getting hung up on some case that's not going to affect you.
Yes. Oh, for sure. Again, why for a lot of people this is one of the greatest legal dramas ever, because it's actually about just the legal stuff and not anything else.
But that's the thing. It is lightly about it, but it's also not about the legal system too. That's what's great about it, is it's such a dynamic piece of cinema in all little regards to all the little details and how it changes from cold hard facts to making every single little thing feel personable or antagonist or wrong, with the racist guy, where like that's his entire personality, and we get to see that, hey, this type of mentality is wrong.
Oh, for sure. And this is the reason why for most reviews and most lineups, this is right behind To Kill a Mockingbird as either first best or second best legal dramas of all time.
I still haven't seen To Kill a Mockingbird.
It's so good. It's so good.
Like I said, legal dramas aren't exactly the movies I'm drawn to, but
understandable though. Not only just in legal drama, this movie's up on a lot of people's list for greatest film ever made, and you can see why. The camera work, the dynamics of the slow building, the acting is all phenomenal. This movie is amazingly good, even for I won't even say even for 1975. I don't think
57.
57. I don't think this movie's age is a factor in any way, and that is a very difficult thing to claim.
No, every person I've shown this movie still holds up in 2023, 2024. Yes. This is one of those movies where you say it's up on some people's favorites. It 100% is for me, because I don't believe in a perfect movie. I think this is the closest to perfect you can get in a movie. This is my 10 out of 10 movie. Am I going to watch it all the time? No, but it's still up there of it's one of the best pieces of cinema to have ever been made.
And critics at the time thought so too. This movie was given a lot of very good praise. It didn't do well at the box office though.
Yeah, that's the thing I find fascinating too, with how good this movie is. It wasn't as successful as United Artists wanted. It made its money up overseas, which usually is signs of a bad movie.
Which is interesting because it didn't make its money back originally. It took them quite a while to truly make that money back. Maybe part of the reason why this style of movie then wasn't remade for quite a while. But even within the same year, it was up for multiple awards with multiple different academies and organizations. So critics loved this. It just, people weren't spending their money on it, which I don't know why, because this movie was captivating. I had a hard time not watching it.
Yeah, well, fuck what critics think. Hell, we're amateur critics. Go watch the movie yourself and make your own interpretation of the evidence.
But also, you probably have already seen a version of this, even if you haven't seen this movie, because this is one of the most parodied and adapted legal drama movies of all time.
Yeah, part of the reason is because it found popularity as a stage play in the 60s.
Very true.
There was a remake in 97 and 2007. And my first reference to this movie, it was parodied in Malcolm in the Middle.
Yes, it was, along with Hey Arnold, Happy Days, Murder, She Wrote, and honestly close to 20 other TV shows that I could find, let alone the ones that I couldn't quite catch the snips of. And those were almost reversion tellings of it. That's very impressive, especially the Hey Arnold one. That's a very good parody if you haven't seen it.
I haven't.
It's surprisingly deep.
Yeah, well,
I mean, it's essentially they got the idea perfect, and for a kid's show, pretty impressive.
Well, and I think that's one thing with the staying power of this movie is, while it was well written already, Lumet said that they had to write by character since they were so constrained by what they could show. And I think that's something that goes with movies that take place in one room, is as long as your characters and what they're revolving around is interesting, you can take a simple idea as 12 men deciding the fate of a murder case and make it more than just that.
Yeah, and even though there were the 2 remakes for this, I would argue that this movie has been fairly untouchable as far as messing it up with remakes or sequels or variations on it, as opposed to just people attempting to do it again.
Well, and that's the thing. This is an adaptation of a television play.
Yeah.
If you have that good core, you can make something interesting that stands the test of time.
Oh, for sure, because boy howdy does this. This movie is captivating. It's hard to not watch. Everything still feels very relative and, honestly, pretty on point and topic for today's climate. And honestly, our judicial system has not changed that much since the 50s.
70 years ago.
Yeah, a little upsetting, but also not, because this means that this movie still stands as an exemplary piece of, what logical thinking, persuasive arguments, and also social interactions can look like.
Exactly. There's plenty of reasons why this, for me, is the perfect in a technical, writing, cinematography
I can see it.
standpoint.
I can see it. And the fact this was filmed in 3 weeks, based off of a TV play that was done live, and this was the director's first big film thing, I am thoroughly impressed. Granted, he went on to do a shit ton of stuff.
Yeah.
So, I'm not terribly surprised looking backwards.
Also hard to fail when you have a good cast behind it, too.
Yeah, and also, Rose from the beginning, who was the original writer, he was overtly involved in this, so, everyone was on board to make this a stellar production, which, hard to fail when everyone's on board with it, but it's still damn impressive that they managed to get this sucker made, and it's still this good.
And stick around, because we've lost a lot of movies from this era, too.
We've lost a ton of movies from this era, and honestly, a lot of the ones that did make it are not the good ones.
No. So, Chris, 12 Angry Men. Good, bad, weird.
For me, this is a solid and perfect good movie. There's nothing bad about it. There's nothing weird about it. But just about everything is good, and I would argue that even the lack of a musical score is a solid selling piece.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'm in the same boat. It's a solid good. I think 12 Angry Men, in its simplistic approach, making a strong statement about how justice is supposed to be carried out while making it a social commentary on top of that. Just, it's the perfect storm of elements without being preachy, because there's plenty of movies that have tried to redo this, and I have a chill review coming out later this week that my biggest complaint is it becomes a bit preachy in its message.
Yeah, that's kind of my argument with the remakes, is they just don't quite seem to get the overall picture the same that this one did.
I still haven't seen the remakes.
I wouldn't bother, if I'm honest with you. Watch this one.
I'd like to see a comparison. I'm still going to do that with the Nosferatu movies and whatnot at some point.
As from a academic sense, I totally think you should. But if you're just interested and you think, oh, I'm going to watch the newer one because it's in color, don't bother. This one's significantly better.
Yeah. So, Chris, do you recommend watching 12 Angry Men?
We have changed our recommendation levels over the years as we have grown and realized that not everything is for everyone. This is for everyone. Everyone should be required to watch this. Not only does this movie teach really great legal understanding and the idea of a proper jury and what your role is supposed to be, but this teaches social understanding. This teaches really great ideas in just judicial and economic senses in general. But on top of that, this movie is wonderful. It's gripping. It's incredibly well written. The acting is phenomenal. This movie should be required for you to graduate high school.
That'd be hard to get some people, because some people won't watch a movie from the 90s.
I get that. This movie is like nothing else that has ever come after it as far as story-driven characters go. This movie is in a unique sense in that we are locked in a room with 12 men. We do not know most of their names for the entirety of the film, and you are invested and interested the entire time. And I say that as someone whose main form of entertainment is shark movies and action-adventure muscle titties.
Yeah.
It kept my attention, and I have shitty children's attention. This movie's impressive.
Yeah, no, I agree with the fact that everyone should see this movie. I think it's one of the greatest pieces, I've harped on this, it's one of the greatest pieces of cinema to ever exist. It's the Scorsese absolute cinema kind of meme.
I agree. Oh, I fully agree.
But not just because it's a good movie, it's because it's just good message in general.
I completely agree. This movie is truly one of a kind.
Exactly, so. But get ready as we do move on to some actual family-friendly choice by myself.
I'm so proud of you.
For good.
Yeah.
And then Chris also has some family-friendly choices.
For not good.
Yeah.
I've been waiting patiently.
You have. You've been a good sport about the Takashi Miike and the good, bad, weird bingo, so.
It's all in fun.
It's time.
It's time we talk about the crappy things I enjoy in my free time.
Yeah. But, anywho, this has been the Good, the Bad, the Weird podcast.
Thanks for listening.
Peace. Thank you for stopping by this here town of the good, the bad, and the weird. We appreciate your listenership, and if you want more of our takes in your life, feel free to check us out on social media at The Good, the Bad, and the Weird Podcast, or tgtbtw for short. As well, if we missed a fact, your favorite part of a movie, or just have a suggestion and want to reach out and say howdy, feel free to email us at tgtbtwpodcast@gmail.com. And feel free to join our Discord at The Good, the Bad, and the Weird Podcast, where we talk about movies, just share random banter here and there. And always, check out our podcasters, streamers, or any other content creator we shout out in our episodes. We really appreciate it. And as always, thank you for listening. Peace!